Throughout human history, we have invented countless ways to express joy, rebellion, and creativity through music and dance, and throughout that same history, people in power have found equally countless ways to be absolutely terrified of people having fun. Today, we are counting down 50 of the dumbest, most ridiculous, and hilariously misguided attempts to ban dancing and music. From governments convinced that hip movements would destroy civilization, to towns that literally outlawed fun, the stupidity. Here is legendary. These are real laws, real bans, and real moments when humanity collectively lost its mind over rhythm. Let us dive into the madness. 1. In 1956, television producers were so terrified of Elvis Presley's hip movements that they ordered cameras to only film him from the waist up. During his appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show, they genuinely believed that if American teenagers saw a man's hips swaying to music, society would immediately collapse into chaos and moral decay. The irony is that by making such a big deal about hiding his lower half, they made everyone even more curious about what those dangerous hips were doing. Congratulations. You turned a singer into a forbidden fruit and made him 10 times more popular. 2. The waltz was considered absolutely scandalous when it first appeared in European ballrooms in the early 1800s. Why? Because partners actually touched each other and danced face to face. Religious leaders called it an invitation to sin, and some venues banned it entirely. Imagine being so threatened by two people holding hands and spinning in a circle that you needed to write legislation about it. These are the same people whose great-great-grandchildren would later clutch their pearls over the twist. 3. Japan had a law that effectively banned dancing in clubs after midnight until 2015. Yes, 2015, not 1915. The law was originally created in 1948 to regulate dance halls that were linked to prostitution, but somehow it stayed on the books for almost 70 years. Club owners could be arrested for allowing people to dance till late at night. In one of the most technologically advanced nations on earth, dancing after midnight was treated like a criminal act. Well into the smartphone era. 4. In 1920s America, the Charleston was blamed for everything from collapsing floors to moral corruption. Several dance halls banned it completely, claiming the vigorous kicks and movements were too dangerous. Some cities passed ordinances against it. A dance where people kicked their legs and had fun was treated like a public safety emergency. The floors that supposedly collapsed were probably just poorly constructed, but sure, blame the dancing. 5. Iran banned all Western music after the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Rock, pop, jazz, and anything with a Western influence was forbidden. For decades, young Iranians had to hide their music collections and hold secret parties where they could listen to banned songs. The government was convinced that electric guitars and drum beats would corrupt the youth. Imagine believing that a Beatles album is more dangerous than actual weapons. 6. The Soviet Union had an extensive list of banned music, including jazz, rock and roll, and eventually disco. They called Western music a tool of capitalist propaganda designed to weaken Soviet values. Underground music scenes thrived despite the bans, with people smuggling records and making bootleg copies unused. X-ray films called bone music or ribs. People literally risked arrest to listen to songs about love and dancing. The lengths humans will go to just to hear a good beat is honestly inspiring. 7. In 1985, the Parents Music Resource Center, led by Tipper Gore and other political wives, launched a crusade against explicit lyrics in rock and heavy metal music. They created the infamous parental advisory stickers, but they wanted much more. They published a list of the filthy 15 songs they found most offensive, including tracks by Prince, Madonna, and Twisted Sister. The whole campaign backfired spectacularly because teenagers started specifically seeking out albums with the warning stickers. Nothing sells records like telling kids they are not supposed to listen. 8. The tango was considered so immoral when it emerged from Buenos Aires that Pope Pius X reportedly banned Catholics from dancing it in 1914. The close embrace and sensual movements were deemed inappropriate for respectable society. European elites were simultaneously fascinated and horrified by this dance from Argentina. They wanted to try it, but they also wanted to publicly condemn it. The hypocrisy of banning something while secretly taking tango lessons is peak human behavior. 9. In 2011, the town of Pound, Virginia briefly considered banning the Macarena from school events because it was deemed too suggestive for children. The Macarena, a dance where you put your hands on your head, shoulders, and hips, apparently. The hip rotation at the end was causing concern among parents who had never seen actual suggestive dancing. If the Macarena is too scandalous for you, I genuinely worry about how you handle the rest of modern existence. 10. During the Nazi regime in Germany, jazz was banned and labeled degenerate music because of its African American origins. The Nazis tried to create their own acceptable version of swing music, with strict guidelines about rhythm and instrumentation. They actually had rules about how many syncopated notes were allowed per measure. Imagine being so obsessed with control that you try to regulate the mathematical structure of music. Spoiler alert, the underground jazz scene thrived anyway, because fascists have never successfully killed art. 11. Saudi Arabia banned public music and dancing for decades. Under strict religious law, concerts were forbidden, and music in public spaces was essentially non-existent. This only started changing around 2017, when the kingdom began loosening social restrictions. For generations, an entire country was denied the simple joy of publicly enjoying music together. The first concerts held after the ban was lifted saw people experiencing live music for the very first time in their lives. 12. The Taliban banned all music in Afghanistan during their first rule, from 1996 to 2001, and again after retaking power in 2021. They destroyed musical instruments, beat musicians, and enforced silence across the nation. They believe music is forbidden by their interpretation of Islamic law. Centuries of Afghan musical tradition were driven underground or into exile. Musicians fled the country with their instruments hidden in suitcases, treating their art like contraband. 13. In the 1980s, many American towns and cities banned or heavily restricted mosh pits at concerts. After several injuries and deaths, some venues required concertgoers to sign waivers, while others banned any standing at all during performances. The idea of legislating how people can move at a rock concert is absurd. If you go into a pit, you accept the chaos. Nobody forced you to jump into a crowd of sweaty strangers throwing elbows. 14. Sweden had a bizarre law requiring venues to obtain a special permit to allow dancing. This dancing permit was difficult to get and led to absurd situations where bars could play music, but patrons were not allowed to move to it. Inspectors would actually visit venues to check if illegal dancing was occurring. Imagine being a government employee whose job is to watch people and make sure they are not secretly enjoying themselves too much. 15. The United Kingdom passed the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act in 1994, which specifically targeted rave culture. The law defined rave music as sounds holy, or predominantly characterized by the emission of a succession of repetitive beats. They literally wrote legislation against repetitive beats. The government was so threatened by young people dancing in fields that they made the rhythm itself illegal. This is what happens when lawmakers have never had fun in their entire lives. 16. In 1958, Boston banned rock and roll concerts after a riot broke out at a show. The city did not allow another major rock concert for over a decade. One bad event led 2 years of prohibition. Meanwhile, plenty of other public gatherings with far worse incidents continued without any bans. Something about young people and electric guitars specifically triggered the authorities. They could not admit that maybe the venue security was just poorly managed. 17. North Korea has banned virtually all foreign music, especially K-pop from South Korea. The regime considers South Korean pop culture a dangerous influence that could make citizens question their leadership. People caught with K-pop videos or music can face severe punishment, including labor camps. The government is terrified of BTS. Let that sink in. An authoritarian regime with nuclear weapons is genuinely. Germany still has laws prohibiting dancing on certain quiet holidays, known as Tanzverbot. On days like Good Friday, public dancing is banned in many German states. Clubs have to close or stop any dancing activities. In a modern European democracy, there are specific days where moving your body to music is legally forbidden. The law feels like a relic from centuries ago, but it is still actively enforced in some regions. 19. Footloose was not entirely fictional. In the 1980s, the small town of Elmore City, Oklahoma had banned dancing for almost 90 years due to religious objections. Students finally fought to overturn the ban so they could have a senior prom. The real story inspired the movie, which then inspired other towns to reconsider their own ridiculous dance restrictions. Sometimes it takes a cheesy film about dancing to make people realize how absurd their laws are. 20. In 2013, a bar in New York City was fined for allowing people to dance without a cabaret license. The cabaret law dated back to the 1920s and was originally designed to control establishments in Harlem with racist undertones. It required venues to obtain special permits to allow dancing. The law was not repealed until 2017, meaning for nearly a century, New York City technically required permission slips for people to dance. In the city that never sleeps, dancing was bureaucratic nightmare. 20-1. The saxophone was banned in various places throughout history because of its association with jazz and supposedly immoral music. The Vatican reportedly banned the saxophone from church music in the early 1900s. Various conservative communities saw the instrument itself as a symbol of degeneracy. They believed the curvy brass instrument was somehow inherently sinful. It is literally just a tube that makes sound when you blow into it. The saxophone did nothing wrong. 20-2. In 1956, Santa Cruz, California banned rock and roll at public events after a concert ended in fighting. The city council declared that this type of music was causing juvenile delinquency. They believed that the rhythm itself was making teenagers misbehave. Maybe, just maybe, the teenagers were already going to cause trouble regardless of what music was playing. But no, clearly the drumbeat was the criminal mastermind here. 23. Afghanistan, under various regimes, has repeatedly banned the rubab, a traditional stringed instrument central to Afghan culture. During both Taliban periods, rubab players hid their instruments or fled the country. A musical tradition thousands of years old was criminalized because fundamentalists decided strings vibrating was against God. Musicians buried their instruments like treasure, hoping to dig them up when sanity returned. 20-4. In 2015, a school in Arkansas banned the whip and nine-nine dance because students were getting too distracted. Teachers complained that kids would break into the dance randomly during class. Instead of just telling students to sit down, they made an official policy banning a specific viral dance. Imagine being a school administrator who has to write a formal document prohibiting a hip-hop move. This is what happens when adults cannot handle children having fun. 20-5. The cancan was so scandalous in 1830s Paris that dancers were regularly arrested for performing it. The high kicks that revealed petticoats and legs were considered indecent exposure. Police would raid venues and arrest performers mid-kick. The dance eventually became a beloved part of French cabaret culture, but only after years of being treated like a crime. Those dancers were basically outlaws just for kicking their legs. 20-6. In the 1980s, heavy metal music was accused of containing hidden satanic messages when played backwards. Parents and religious groups demanded bans and held public album burning events. Bands like Judas Priest were actually put on trial, accused of hiding subliminal suicide commands in their music. The hysteria was completely unfounded, but it ruined careers and frightened families for nothing. Turns out the only thing metal music encouraged was headbanging, not devil worship. 20-7. In 2014, Pharrell Williams' song Happy was banned in Iran after videos of young Iranians dancing to it went viral. 6 people were arrested for appearing in a tribute video, dancing unveiled and joyfully in public. They were charged with hurting public chastity. A song literally called Happy led to arrests and international outrage. The Iranian government was terrified of joy being expressed publicly. Let that sink in. 20-8. In some parts of the United States, twerking has been banned at school dances and public events. Various schools have specifically prohibited the dance move in their student handbooks. Proms have been shut down when twerking was spotted on the dance floor. Administrators have been forced to define exactly what constitutes twerking in official documents. Somewhere, a school board member had to write a legal definition of booty shaking. That person deserves a raise for their suffering. 20-9. In the 1920s, the city of Cleveland banned jazz from dance halls after 11 p.m. because they believed the music was too stimulating for late-night hours. They thought that jazz rhythms combined with late hours would lead to immoral behavior. Apparently, the same music was fine at 10 p.m., but became dangerous 1 hour later. The arbitrary logic of moral panics never fails to amaze me. 30. The lambada was banned from several school dances and youth events in the late 1980s. Because of its close body contact and hip movements, the Brazilian dance became internationally popular, but was deemed as sexual for teenagers. Schools that had no problem with students slow dancing suddenly drew the line at lambada. The dance was essentially criminalized at prom, while far more questionable things happened in the parking lot afterward. 31. In 1999, Cuba briefly restricted reggaeton music because officials believed it was vulgar and promoted bad values. The genre was seen as a foreign influence that did not align with revolutionary principles. Despite the restrictions, reggaeton only grew more popular on the island. Banning music has literally never worked in any country ever, but governments keep trying like it is going to work this time. 30-2. Russia has considered various restrictions on rap music, with officials calling it a threat to national security. In 2018, the Russian government discussed controlling rap concerts after several high-profile artists had shows canceled. They claimed rap promoted drug use and immoral behavior. Russia has nuclear weapons and is worried about rhyming. The priorities here are absolutely fascinating. 30-3. In the Philippines, under Ferdinand and Marcos, certain rock music was banned during martial law in the 1970s. Foreign rock that promoted protest or rebellion was seen as a threat to the dictatorship. Local artists who performed anything deemed subversive could be arrested. Music once again proving that authoritarian regimes recognize the power of a good song to inspire resistance. 30-4. Singapore banned the song Puff the Magic Dragon at one point because they suspected it was about marijuana. The 1963 Peter, Paul and Mary song about a dragon and a boy was treated like drug propaganda. The songwriters repeatedly denied any drug references, but Singapore was not convinced. Imagine banning a children's song because you are suspicious of a fictional dragon's herbal habits. 30-5. In the 1950s, several radio stations in the American South banned rock and roll records by black artists, but would play cover versions by white artists. This was less about the music and more about racism disguised as moral concern. They claimed the original versions were too vulgar, but somehow the same lyrics became acceptable when sung by white performers. The hypocrisy was never subtle, but they pretended it was about values. 30-6. Malaysia has banned numerous songs over the years for various reasons, including promoting immoral behavior or being too Western. Songs by Lady Gaga, Kesha, and many others have been forbidden from radio play. The government has a committee that reviews songs and decides what Malaysians are allowed to hear. A room full of bureaucrats listening to pop music and checking boxes for morality violations is an incredible mental image. 30-7. In 2012, a town in New Jersey temporarily banned the song Call Me Maybe from being played at the public pool. Lifeguards had been playing it so frequently that parents complained it was driving them insane. This is less about moral panic and more about legitimate noise annoyance. Honestly, after hearing that song 500 times, I understand the impulse. The polka was considered scandalous when it emerged in the 1840s because it required couples to hold each other closely. Bohemian peasant dancing was seen as unfit for respectable ballrooms. Religious leaders warned against the polka just as they would later warn against the waltz and tango. Every generation has its dance panic, and every panic eventually looks ridiculous to the next generation. 30-9. In 2018, flossing. The dance move, popularized by Fortnite, was banned in numerous schools across America and Britain. Teachers complained that students would not stop flossing in hallways, classrooms, and during lunch. Some schools added it to their list of prohibited behaviors alongside fighting and cheating. We have reached a point where a silly arm-swinging dance is treated with the same severity as academic dishonesty. 40. Chinese authorities have banned hip-hop artists from appearing on television at various points, claiming the culture promotes vulgarity. Rappers with tattoos, those who promote materialism, or anyone deemed to have low moral character have been blacklisted. In 2018, a rapper was banned from Chinese social media for mentioning drugs in his lyrics. The government wants hip-hop without any of the elements that make it hip-hop. 40-1. In the 1930s, several American cities banned marathon dancing competitions after contestants died from exhaustion. These Depression-era events had people dancing for days on end, hoping to win prize money. While the bans made sense from a safety perspective, the fact that marathon dancing to death was ever popular enough to require legislation is a wild piece of history. 40-2. In 2011, a group was arrested at the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. for silently dancing. The National Park Service had rules against demonstrations at the memorial, and apparently swaying to music counted. Officers physically restrained people for the crime of moving rhythmically near a statue. The absurdity of arresting someone for quiet dancing at a monument to liberty is almost a perfect. 40-3. Myanmar's military junta banned karaoke after 10 p.m. in 2011, claiming it disturbed public order. Singing popular songs at night was treated as a threat to national security. Secret karaoke sessions became a form of quiet rebellion. When singing in a small room with friends becomes an act of resistance, you know your government has lost the plot completely. 40-4. The twist was banned from multiple venues in the early 1960s because the hip-rotating moves were considered too provocative. Despite being a dance where partners did not even touch each other, conservatives saw it as the downfall of society. They were terrified of people spinning their hips independently. The human pelvis has apparently been a source of government concern for centuries. 40-5. In 1990, the state of Florida tried to ban the Live Cruise album As Nasty as They Wanna Be, making it the first album ever declared legally obscene by a federal court. Record store owners were arrested for selling it. The ban was later overturned on appeal, but not before turning the group into free speech martyrs. Sales skyrocketed because nothing sells albums like the government telling people they cannot buy them. 40-6. Belly dancing has been restricted or banned in various countries throughout history due to its sensual movements. Egypt, the traditional home of belly dancing, has periodically cracked down on performances deemed too provocative. The irony of Egypt restricting one of its most famous cultural exports is not lost on anyone. They want the tourist dollars, but not the actual dancing. 40-7. In 2014, South Korea banned music videos that were deemed harmful to youth, including those with excessive drinking, sexual content, or inappropriate dancing. K-pop groups had to create censored versions of their choreography for broadcast. Agencies literally hired choreographers to make dances less interesting, so they could pass the censors. The banned versions always became more popular internationally. 40-8. Breakdancing was banned from numerous malls and public spaces in the 1980s because of concerns about crowds and safety. Security guards would chase off breakers who set up cardboard on the floor. The dance form, born in New York streets, was treated like vandalism. Kids spinning on their heads were apparently a threat to retail commerce. 40-9. In the early 2000s, Singapore banned the song Crazy by Gnarls Barkley from radio until stations agreed to censor the lyric "Who do you think you are?" Authorities felt the phrase was too confrontational. They were threatened by a rhetorical question in a pop song. The idea that asking someone who they think they are could destabilize society is genuinely unhinged. 50. And finally, we have perhaps the most ridiculous dance ban of all time. In 2023, a school in Australia banned students from doing the Gritty, a touchdown celebration dance popularized by NFL players. Teachers complained that students were doing it everywhere, all the time, without any athletic achievement to celebrate. The school specifically cited the dance by name in their new rules. We have officially reached the point where a silly leg-wobbling celebration is considered a disciplinary matter. Somewhere, a principal had to Google the Gritty, learn what it was, and then write an official policy against it. That person has seen things.